Welcome, everyone. It's Monday again. We're here on the Monday Mindset, and I have Kevin DeShazo with me once again. You just don't go away, do you?
I don't. They keep letting me on here for some reason, which is a
I
mistake,
know.
but here we are.
Both Kevin and I are in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and I got to say, I'm trying to stay positive this morning. It's a really cold day here and wet and just kind of all
It's just one
around.
of those days. It is a stereotypical Monday, right? It's freezing outside. It's freezing rain outside. We're probably going to have an ice storm, but that's all right, right?
Yeah,
We get to choose our mindset, right?
that's
So
right.
no matter what it's doing outside, we can show up on purpose.
That's right. So what I want to know is, how was your morning run? Because I know you're an avid runner.
Well, Tracy, it did not happen today, and it's funny you ask. We were talking off camera before this, and I've over the past several years have made running a priority in my life for my physical health, mental health. Just we know that rest is a competitive advantage for leaders, and I've had to learn that, and that's one of the ways that may sound counterintuitive, but running is one of the ways that I rest. And so I've been doing it on weekends, mostly Saturdays and Sundays. And yesterday, it was a cold weekend, right? It was 85 in Oklahoma, by the way, like 5 days ago.
Yeah.
And now it's in the 30s for the next couple of days with an ice storm. I believe the earliest ice warning on record, I think I saw this morning. But it was cold yesterday, right? It was in the 40s, wind chill in the 30s. And I decided, nope, it's too cold. I'm not going to run. It's too cold. And in 40s, I'm fine with, but if it feels like it's in the 30s, like that's when I really start to question things. 45 is actually almost perfect for a run. And so I was not going to go. And then I sit down, got a cup of coffee, and I start Googling articles about cold weather running. And I do this every year. Like I convince myself it's too cold, I'm not going to run. And then I read an article about people who are like, oh yeah, unless it's 5 degrees or below, like I'm going to go out and run. I actually love running in the cold. So I decided, okay, don't be lazy, get up, go for a run. So got my cold weather gear on, went for a run, and it was great.
Wow. I'm impressed. That's dedication.
Well, you know how disciplined I am. Discipline is a strong suit of mine. But I will say, and I think we talked about it maybe last week, but doing stuff like this, if I'm going to speak on these things, I don't have to be an expert or perfect. So
Right.
don't want to give that impression. But I do want to try, like it raises my level of my own personal accountability. Right? I don't want to talk about these things and not do them. And so that goes to my mind of, man, what would I say on Monday Mindset? What would I say if I'm in front of a team doing a session on commitment, on discipline, on building better habits, on not making excuses and living your standard? And here I am making excuses. And so those thoughts do come into my mind. Like, no, you have to preach the things that you practice, the things that you preach. So try to live that as much as possible.
True. Well, same for me. I think I've said on here before that I've made this commitment this year not to be a complainer, not even complain about the weather, even the small things. And so this morning I decided I'm not complaining about it. Now, it doesn't mean it's my favorite. I don't have to be a fan, but I'm not going to complain about it. In fact, I was thinking this morning, these days make me really, really appreciate great weather days. So that's what these days do for me.
Amen.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay, well, let's get into it today. What are we going to talk about today?
What are we talking about today? So today is one of my favorite and least favorite topics, the idea of self-preservation. And it's such a massive issue in leadership, in our culture, with individuals. And so we use a tool called self-preservation. And really, it comes down to three things. There are three questions that you have to be constantly aware of. What am I afraid of losing? What am I trying to hide? And what am I trying to prove, and to whom? And if you're listening to this, either live or the recording, I really want you to wrestle with these questions, because once you realize that your answers to these questions, then you play out, well, how is that impacting the way that I show up? How's that impacting the way I interact with people? And I think we can trace every negative decision or action or interaction from a leader to self-preservation. Like, that's how significant I think this is for leaders and for teams and for organizations. It leads to so many unhealthy things that take us out as leaders, that take out our teams. So I want to walk through each one of these. So what are you afraid of losing? Right? You're afraid of losing your job. You're afraid of losing your house. You're afraid of losing your income. You're afraid of losing your reputation. You're afraid of losing influence. You're afraid of losing comfort. What is it that you're afraid of losing? And how's that impacting the way that you show up? Again, I think let's use sports, for example. Again, I work with a lot of sports teams. That's mostly my world. And you have a lot of coaches, a lot of ADs, a lot of people who are showing up afraid of losing, not just a game, but afraid of losing their job, because we play out the worst case scenario. Well, if I lose this game, then I lose my job, and I lose my house, and I lose my family, I lose my money, and all these just crazy scenarios that aren't going to come true, by the way. But we play out this worst case scenario in our mind. So then we get desperate to not lose. We try to hold on to this thing. I'm desperate to not lose a game or my house or my influence. And usually what that causes you to do is to lose it, because you overprotect it. And that thing that you were so desperate to not lose, you end up losing. And it's such an unhealthy thought pattern, right? This mindset of, oh, I'm afraid of losing influence. Well, if you're afraid of losing influence, you're going to do things that will undermine your influence, because that becomes your focus narrows into this one thing. So you lose sight of the bigger picture, and it's all about, well, how can I keep this? How can I keep this thing? And you ultimately will undermine yourself. And people see that you're acting selfish or you're acting out of character, and it's all about you trying to not lose this one thing, and you end up losing it. Right? How many people lose their jobs because they were so focused on not losing their job? So what are you afraid of losing? What are you trying to hide? What is it? Is it maybe your own perceived incompetence? Maybe it's an error that you made. Maybe it's that you don't feel like you belong in the position that you're in, right? And so you maybe think like, man, I don't know if I'm qualified to be in this position. So you're trying to hide that. So every interaction is you trying to prevent people from seeing the real you, prevent people from realizing, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't have an answer for this, or he made this mistake in the past, or whatever it may be. Well, ultimately that's going to come out, right? And people are going to find out what you're trying to hide. What's in the dark always comes to light. So the things that you're trying to hide, again, these don't have to be crazy dramatic things. It could just be your own thoughts and feelings and insecurities. But then what are you trying to prove? I think this is the one that really gets people. What are you trying to prove, and to whom? I think too many of us are desperate for validation and acceptance from other people. And I want to give you an example of a guy I was working with a few years ago, unbelievably successful, had a great organization, was a business owner, ran a company that was making tens of millions of dollars, man of great character, had a great team, great family. His wife was incredible. His kids were awesome. And as we were sitting down, he was burnt out. He was overdoing it, overworking with his team. And so we're walking through it. We're having breakfast. And I said, did you just hire a terrible team? Like, do you have really incompetent people? He said, no, they're unbelievable. I've got a better team than I could ever dream of having. And he knew some of our language. He knew this tool. And I said, well, feels to me like maybe there's some level of self-preservation. Feels like, is there someone you're trying to prove yourself to? Like, what's going on here? And he sat back as we're having breakfast, took a deep breath. And this guy's probably in his lower 50s. Again, extremely successful by every measure of the word. And he said, I don't think my dad's ever told me that he's proud of me. He goes, I don't even know if I've ever actually processed that out loud until right now. He said, but I want my dad to be proud. I want to hear that my dad is proud of me. And so you could just feel as he was saying that, like this weight kind of dropping off of him, just letting that even out of his. It's okay to want your dad to be proud of you, right? It's okay to want your that approval. It's not an inherently bad thing, but that's driving you in a really unhealthy way. And the reality is that if you get that from your dad, it doesn't really change anything. And I'm sure your dad is proud of you. So I'm sure he's probably an old school man. He loves you. He's proud of you. He's just not going to say it. But you being desperate for that is impacting you and those around you in a negative way. You're working yourself to death trying to prove that to your dad. And I said, what if your dad called you right now? I said, man, look at what you've built. Look at what you've done. Like, I couldn't be more proud of you. Unbelievable company, great career. Your family's amazing. You're a man of character and integrity. You work hard. I couldn't be more proud to be your dad. I said, what then? He said, man, that would be incredible. I said, no, I know it would be awesome. And again, it's okay to want that. I said, but then what? He said, well, I've got a 9:30 meeting. I said, that's right. No matter whether your dad is proud of you or not, or whether or not you know your dad is proud of you or not, your team at 9:30 needs you at your best. So you don't have to prove anything to your dad. Not out of ego, right? So this part of self-preservation is not about ego, but you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. If you're a player and your coach says, you're the best player I've seen, doesn't matter. You still have to show up and do the work. It doesn't really change who you are or what you're about. And so this idea of what are you trying to hide? What are you afraid of losing? What are you trying to prove? It's such a heavy, can be a heavy thing, but it takes us out as leaders because it's impacting us in such a negative way, the way that we think, the way that we act, the way that we speak, the way that we interact. And so to get to a place to be secure, confident, and humble in who you are, it's like, I've got nothing to lose. I've got nothing to hide. I'm an open book, and I've got nothing to prove to anyone, right? I know who I am. I'm secure in who I am. I'm confident in what I bring to the table and in my abilities, but I'm humble enough to know that I always have more to learn and I'm not going to get it perfect. What do you think about that, Tracy?
Yeah, very interesting. We have a question coming in actually from Tamara. She says, does everyone have self-preservation? And are there certain personalities that struggle more than others with self-preservation?
Great question, Tamara. I think everyone deals with it. I think you could probably get it down to certain personalities may have more of an issue. But I think everyone, I mean, genuinely every leader, and I have dealt with, fortunately, people who we would consider to be some of the most successful people in certain industries, and they still deal with it, and it impacts every decision. And it's a lot of it, the desperation to prove themselves, but also they're afraid of losing. So I think it does impact everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you would wish and you would hope that at some point you'd come to this maturity level, maybe you're at an age where you don't care what other people think, but I think you're right. I don't think that there's ever a time when you completely master it, but I do think that you can put some things in place to be better about it. And I think just these three questions are so incredibly powerful. And I will say, I think, Kevin, we're having trouble with your camera, but we can still hear you, so keep going. But I was going to say, these questions are so thought-provoking. I mean, these aren't simple questions to just ask yourself and answer immediately. These are things that you would really need to ponder for a while, maybe write them down, put them on your desk, and think about them over the next week or 2 weeks. Because those are big questions. What am I afraid of losing? I mean, there are things at our core, maybe from childhood or from experiences, from failures, that we are scared to death to lose. It's just the truth. And there's none of us that are exempt from that, just the way it is. There are things that we want to hide. So I love these. Yeah, I can see where this would hold people back, this wall. And that's why we call it a wall. It is an absolute wall that you have to break through.
That's right. And ultimately, it's impacting you from having the influence that you want to have and should have, right? Like I said, that's why we call it the wall of self-preservation, because it's all the influence you want and need and hope to have is on the other side of that wall. It's on the other side of self-preservation. And so your willingness to battle through it. And it's not you're not going to wake up tomorrow and be without self-preservation, right? It's a daily thing. And part of that, like my morning routine that I've talked about is to help me battle against that. I can think of many times in my career where I've been desperate to prove myself, being in a certain room, being on a certain stage, like, oh, I've got to go just kill it and be amazing in this. And I want them to love me and think I'm the best speaker they've ever heard. And what I'm actually doing then is serving my own ego, instead of saying, no, whether they like me or not, or think I'm a great speaker or not, it doesn't ultimately matter. Again, not from a place of ego, but say my job is to get up and deliver the message that I feel like I'm supposed to give and serve them in the way that I feel like I'm supposed to serve, and just trust the rest. If they think I'm good enough, awesome. If they don't, that's okay. And it really is a difficult place to get there. You have to battle that. And I think coaches too, I think there's an easy example in the sports world to say, coaches go through all of this right? Because they get the job and they're desperate to prove themselves, desperate to prove, oh, I've got to show that I'm the right guy for the job, that I'm worth the contract, that I'm worth the money. And so that's just driving them in a really unhealthy way. Well, then they start to lose a couple games, and that pressure kicks in, and they talk about the standard, they talk about the culture, they talk about the values, but they feel that, oh gosh, I don't want to lose. If I lose this game again, I'll lose my job. I'll lose everything. I'll lose everything I have. And so we're just going to deviate from the path just a little bit, just this one time, right? Just this one time, then we'll get back to who we say we are. And so they win a few more games and they start to lose a couple and they get off the path again. And it's a V shape for a reason, right? Like one little step keeps going and you get further and further and further off the path. That's why they call it a slippery slope, because ultimately you'll wake up and be like, wait a minute, this is not who I wanted to be. This is not the team we wanted to have. I was so desperate to prove myself that I did the opposite. I was so afraid of not losing that I lost. And so it's to be, again, secure, humble, and confident in every day, every moment. It's like, I don't have to prove that I'm worth this title. I don't have to prove myself to my dad or to anyone else. Again, not out of ego, but if you can battle these things, first step is just recognize it, right? And to be willing to be honest with yourself, say, man, I am trying to prove myself to this industry or to this, to my boss or to somebody who said I was wrong, that I could never do this. Right? We love to prove the critics wrong, prove the haters wrong. It's like, that's an exhausting way to live, because if you're constantly living to prove others wrong, you always have to find somebody who's against you, who disagree. Like, you're manufacturing issues and enemies. It's like, no, what would happen if you would just be you and be secure in that? Like, to actually live into your potential, because that's who you are made to be, not because you're trying to prove somebody else wrong. Because what happens is that you win, right? You prove them wrong, and that feels good for about a day. Well, then what?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Margaret says vulnerability and humility is crucial to overcome self-preservation. These three questions help get to the truth behind those walls. And that's so true. I was thinking, as Margaret, I guess, was thinking at the same time, I was thinking humility, vulnerability, transparency. There's nothing more refreshing than hearing someone say, I screwed up, or, yeah, I'm not great at that, but, just so that someone we know, I mean, there's too much on social media and all that. It's already, people feel like they're robots. Like, are they people real? And it's just so refreshing and nice when you see a leader that can admit their failures, that know their tendencies, negative tendencies, and have that humble spirit about them. And they start pulling those walls down. And then you go, okay, I can relate. I can trust that person. And it really does increase your admiration in them, and it increases your trust, and their influence really does go up.
That's right. The people who are secure, confident, and humble are those that we want to be around. They're those that we want to follow. Those are the people that we want to be like. We're like, how did she get there? Like, how did she get to that place? Because I want to be there, because she's successful, but she's at peace, right, with that success. She's not anxious or stressed out or trying to prove that she's something that she's not. It's like, no, they just show up and they're confident in what they bring to the table and who they are. On the flip side, those who are insecure, right, those who are desperate to prove something, those who are afraid of losing things, and we sense that. And we may not, maybe now you have a language for what that looks like and what that feels like, but you can sense that when you're around people. Like, man, something's just off. That's not a person that I want to be around. And again, you can see this in any industry, whether it's politics. I think if you start to, whenever someone makes a decision that maybe hurts you, or maybe you disagree with, or maybe your boss does something like, man, I don't really get that, try to see it through this lens, because it's changed the way that I interact with and coach and consult people, because I see their negative, unhealthy interactions and habits and decisions come from this place. And it's not me excusing that behavior. It's be like, he's just trying to prove himself. I get it. I get why he would do that. Again, it's not to say that's okay. It just gives you a better lens to see those actions, interactions, which helps you fight for them in a better way. And so it's again, I think most negative interaction and behaviors from leaders, most crises, are born out of self-preservation.
I agree. I know I always bring it back down to the home, but you're raising young children, you have a wife at home. I was a stay-at-home mom for years, and I was actually at a wedding the other day, and there was a young couple next to me, and they had I think about a 2-month-old at home and then a toddler, and the people behind them knew them and said, "Oh, how's it going?" Because they had a little one at home too. And this couple next to me said, "Honestly, it's not going so well. In fact, we're struggling. We are sleep deprived, and this is not that fun many days." And I really appreciated that. And because of that, the conversation kept going, because the other couple said, "Oh, I know it's hard." And they weren't downing it. They weren't being negative. They were just saying it's hard. And I really appreciated that. It kept the conversation going. Otherwise, if they'd gone, "Oh, we're good, we're all good," and then the other couple would have been like, "Yeah, we're good too," and the conversation would have stopped. And instead, it opened up. They had all of this camaraderie, I guess, together, and that's what that does. And it doesn't mean you manufacture things if they're not going well. It's not that at all. It's just that vulnerability, being open and honest with each other, and leading each other, calling each other up is.
That's right. And it's authenticity, right? And you kind of mentioned it with social media. Is I think so many of us feel a pressure to prove ourselves, to prove that we're successful, to prove that we have it all together. We have the right house and the right family and the right meals and the right vacations. And it's like, we're all messed up. We're all awkward. We're all weird. We all have these little issues. We're all just trying to figure it out each day. And to realize, like, oh, okay, I don't have to put on this front. I don't have to act like I can just be me. And that actually invites everyone else around you to be them. Because when you're trying to be something you're not, you're isolating yourself. People like, well, I don't want to be, he must have everything together. Like, look, he's got this and this and this. Like, I can't relate to that. And you don't have it all together, right? Nobody does. But when you try to project this image of you're perfect, you got it all figured out, that actually doesn't make people want to be near you. It makes them want to be away from you. But when you have this, you're projecting this authentic image of, I've got some things figured out. The rest of it, I'm just trying to get better, trying to learn as I go, and acknowledge my stumbles along the way. People are like, oh, good, me too. I want to be around that. And and when you do that, people can actually get better. And so I think to realize that a lot of self-preservation, it comes out as ego. It looks like ego, but it's really insecurity.
Yeah.
And so to realize, like, if people are projecting something and that feels like they're just egotistical, it's insecurity, right? The ego is masking insecurity, and it's that self-preservation. And again, it's not to accept that, but to see that. I'm afraid of losing my job, especially in this economy. How do I get past that? Totally get it, Damien. I think that's a real, I don't want to say fear, but a real issue. And so here's what I would say that, and Tracy, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this, because it's possible. All you can do, though, is, like, you worrying about it isn't going to change it. You can spend all day and night worrying about it. And again, I understand it. So don't hear what I'm not saying. I understand the concern. You worrying about it isn't going to change it. So I always love to tell people, if you can change it, don't worry about it. If you can't change it, don't worry about it. Worry is wasted energy and wasted effort. All you can do is show up and bring your best each day. Like that's the only thing you can control. You can't control the economy. You can't control the industry. You can't control your boss. You can't control the markets. Like, all completely out of your control. The one thing you can control is you. And so if you put your energy into that, say, I can't worry about all these billions of things that I can't control, which is where we want to spend our energy. And that keeps us from doing the things that we should and can be doing. So I don't want you to also hear me saying, if you just bring your best to the day, that you're guaranteed a job, because I don't want to guarantee anybody any outcome. It's a pandemic. A lot of people who have given their best to their jobs are without jobs. I mean, it happens. And some of that's pandemic, economy stuff. Some of that's just a result of insecure leaders, right? Making bad decisions and cutting people who are doing great work, who they see as a threat. So there are a lot of things. There is no guaranteed outcome ever. But I think you just show up and you bring your best to each day. And then if something happens, then we got to figure out another plan. But you can't control it. And I don't mean that to be like fluffy wisdom or advice, but just really, like, you'll be more at peace when you just give up the things that you can't control. Tracy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I'd say two things. If you really do think that there's a possibility that maybe economically your company can't keep you or whatever, I would go ahead and start being proactive and looking around. You're probably already doing that, but just kind of start putting some things in place if you think you're at that point. The other thing is I love what you said. Just you can control what you can control, Kevin, but go ahead and write a list. I mean, I'm a real concrete thinker. If I can see it visually, I mean, put a poster on your bathroom mirror or something and list out, okay, are there some certifications I need to get right now to up my game, within my industry? Is there something that I can actually go to my boss and say, could I take on some extra responsibilities to just show that you're a team player and you're really in it? Just list some concrete things that you can do. Otherwise, your mind's just going to start playing tricks on you and you're going to start dreaming of things that maybe aren't even reality. And so I'd say just make a concrete plan for now, where you're at, and for if future comes. Yeah.
Yep. And I think even, and not to put a burden on you, because Damien, I don't know your situation, but it might be a time where if you had a side thought you've been thinking about for a long time, is there something you can do on the side now to supplement some of that income that may or may not be lost? But to say, you know what, it's a weird time. I've got a few extra hours a week. I'm gonna, again, whatever it may be, it might be a time to look at a side hustle. Not that you want to spend 40 hours a week on that, but to prepare. Is there something is there advice people are consistently asking you for, things that people are consistently asking you to solve? You could potentially do that as a side business. But I fully believe, and again, I don't want to be naive about this stuff. I understand the gravity of the world, that our best days are in front of us. That doesn't mean things are awesome right now, but better things are coming. And I've just seen people in the midst of this pandemic choose to invest in themselves as leaders, as spouses, as parents, in order to get better. I've seen people they just do whatever they have to do. I know a guy who was in the sports world who stepped down from a role in March, bad timing, was paid through, I believe, April or May, but just to stay busy, he was stocking shelves from midnight to 5 a.m. at a grocery store. No ego. Said, and he didn't have to do it yet. He said, but I want to be busy. I want to make sure like I'm having effort, putting myself out into the world just in case something happened. So I think that's an ego self-preservation thing too. Like, oh, I can't go stock grocery shelves. I was doing this a month ago. You just got to do at times. And hopefully it doesn't get that way for people. But I think, again, Damien, own your mindset, right? Because if you're afraid of it, that's going to cause you to not do the right things at work, no matter how strong your character is. If you're afraid of losing it, you're going to overprotect that, which increases your chance of losing it. So you want to just make sure you're doing the right things. I love what Tracy said. Write down, make a list of things that you can control, make a list of places where you add value, ask for more responsibility, maybe start making a plan. It might be a time to start looking at other things, but worry is wasted energy. It's just not helpful. And I don't mean that, again, to be naive. I just, from my own life, I just know that worry isn't going to change anything.
So true. Well, we are almost out of time. And I do want to remind those of you who are tuning in from LinkedIn or Facebook, we have a platform that is full of really amazing resources. And we always kind of guess on how many episodes. We should count them, but I think probably over 500 episodes on different subject matters, as far as knowing more about your personality, knowing about how to strengthen your team. There's so much on there for free, and we want to invite you to just get an account. Really, seriously, it's for free. So giant.tv/free account, get on there and just start learning. In this time, when things are unsure, working, like Kevin said, on yourself and learning more and, making your skill set more robust. There's nothing that can be negative about that. So we invite you to that. And Kevin, any last words of wisdom before we go?
Yeah, I would say if you're listening to this, you are good enough. Like, you can always get better, but you have nothing to prove to anyone. If you can get that into your head, that's when I see taking out the most people, is they're desperate to prove themselves. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone, right? You are good enough. You have what it takes. Keep showing up, keep getting better. The world needs secure, confident, humble leaders. The more you run down that path, the more influence you're going to have. Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. We will see you right here, same time, same place next week. Absolutely. Bye-bye.